It's also very important for the students of public policy in Pakistan to understand and study the institutions of policy making in British India uh, due to many reasons. One of the reasons is that we will find many features of colonial policy making and colonial institutions present in post-colonial Pakistan. To start with, if you look at policy making in colonial India, British Parliament exercised a lot of authority over policy making. Many decisions were taken by the parliamentarians in British Parliament. For example, you would be familiar with very important case of education policy in India and the minute of Makule, which was presented to British Parliament in 1835. Many policy making issues would actually be taken to the British Parliament, and they would be settled there after debate among the parliamentarians. A Secretary of the State was very important institution in British policy making. These two places, British Parliament and the Secretary of the State, they tell how centralized policy making during the British colonial period was in India, because a lot of policy decisions would actually be taken in England, not in India. Thirdly, colonial office was a highly powerful institution which would influence policy making in all of the British colonies, including India. But since India was the biggest colony in British Empire, colonial office exercised tremendous powers in influencing policy making and political decisions for India. These three institutions, British Parliament, Secretary of the State, and Colonial Office, exercised highly, uh, they played highly important roles in the Britain. But if we come to India, in the Indian state, colonial state in India was highly centralized and highly powerful, and most of the decisions would be taken at in a centralized way by the colonial administration in India, and the people who actually contributed to decision making in India, they included top civil servants in the colonial service, and they were in a central role of European scientists and experts. They were listened, they were generally listened to by the top civil servants and colonial administrators in India while deciding many issues related to law and order and economic policy, education policy, labor policy, health policy. So, the colonial administration, colonial bureaucracy, including the top civil servants and the European scientists and experts, they played highly important role in colonial policy making in India. When in 20th century, legislative councils were formed in many parts of British India, they were given very limited role in policy making, and the colonial officers in charge of those legislative councils could bypass or could nullify the policy proposals given by these councils. So if we look at this institutions or institutional infrastructure of policy making in British India, we will see that unelected people controlled policy making, and the policy making was highly centralized. In many cases it went to the UK, and in many cases when decisions were taken in India, they were taken by the highly powerful civil servants in charge of the colonial administration, and there was very limited role of legislative councils. It means that ordinary people or even the middle classes were not consulted, or they were not part of policy making during colonial period.